right? That's what's happening. The judicial solution, obviously, would be to try to delay that. But in the absence of that, what's going to happen is you're going to have carriers, you're going to have broker-dealers, you're going to have investment advisory firms, everybody prepare for implementation. One of the things that the department clearly is counting on is if people invest enough money in preparing, they're going to be less inclined to rip it apart. Just practical, pragmatic fact. So what this really comes down to from your standpoint, as a producer, as an advisor, as somebody that your clients trust, the silver lining in this is that even though it may be painful, there is a really good way to do business in the new world. This has happened before in our industry, and I'm sure it'll happen again. Anytime that there is a massive change, the reps, the advisors that adapt to that change typically tend to do very well. There will be some shakeout. Some people that just say, I just don't want to do it. And that's okay. But I think what's going to end up happening here pragmatically, because keep in mind that even if they are successful in delaying or stopping this Department of Labor regulation, even if Paul Ryan is able to successfully get some of these bipartisan legislative solutions through, keep in mind that that is only going to bring us to the intermission, because it's going to come back again. In fact, by definition of that legislation, it would come back again with the idea in mind of adhering to these principles, these standards, to come up with a legislative solution that would accomplish the same thing, but do it less painfully. So when I look at that and I say, I want to do in my business a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plan of where I want to go, I have to take into account that no matter how the story ends on this particular rule, the world is going to change. That there is a mandate, whether it be all DOL, legislative, SEC finally coming in, which Mary Jo White has indicated that they're full out doing it, no detail. At the end of the day, there is clear pressure that we're going to have some new way of accountability of demonstrating that we're doing the right thing for our clients. So what I think it's going to boil down to, and this is what Jeff thinks section, I think what it really boils down to is a lot of folks are going to really begin to ramp up their IAR business. I think that you're going to see product development, if you will, on that side, particularly for the smaller accounts, on how to handle that. It's going to be obviously a tough story to say to somebody, hey, you're in this mutual fund over here. I can put you over here and wrap it with a fee. It just costs you more money. How many clients are going to react well to that? None, right? But I think to the extent that you can make the case to say, unfortunately, by way of legislation or regulation or both, I am prohibited in working with you unless I work with you this way, and I don't want to leave you abandoned. Here is an IAR alternative that keeps you fee neutral, keeps you in the same type of investment you're in today, but it keeps me in the loop and I'll be your advisor. And by the way, I'm acting as a fiduciary on this, which means I am guaranteed to be working in your best interest, or I can't do that. Smaller accounts, people that would kind of get away from what you would define as an investor, they're getting more into a saver mode. Maybe they have accumulated money in a 401k plan for 30 years and they say, gosh, Jeff, this $300,000, I listened to you about dollar cost averaging all these years, and this is great, but now I have this 300, and outside of a Powerball win, I can't replace this. That's a great place for a fixed annuity. I think that the 84-24 exemption will be a more forgiving path for you. And so what happens is these tools begin to emerge, and it begins to turn into how the business plan turns into kind of a segmentation plan. You know, you do a segmentation of your business, and it becomes an all-out effort. The good news is by the time you're done with that effort, in my opinion, you're going to be so good at this, you're going to be collecting tons of business along the way, too. So it's like so many things. I've been doing this for 32 years. There's been so many times that we get kicked in the teeth by whether it be, you know, Department of Labor, SEC, FINRA, insurance departments, you name it. But if we take it as an opportunity to reconfigure our business, I think you really can actually find yourself personally on the leading edge of it and doing very well. So anybody that doesn't have a tomato in their hand, if you would like to ask a question, be happy to answer to the best of my ability. Yes, sir.
I'm a member of an organization called SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management. How does this new ruling affect human resource personnel, administrators, and sponsors of plans?
Okay, well, I would actually kind of divide those out. You know, human resources people, they're going to react in a variety of different ways. You know, it won't be surprising to me on 401ks if human resources people react by looking for institutional solutions. Some of the, you know, the Vanguards of the world or whatever, that it could be troubling. But I do think that the IAR could, you know, a person could come in and say, I'm not going to act as a registered rep anymore on this account. I'm going to act as a fiduciary. Here's a different type of program. Reprice it accordingly. So your HR people, you know, they're going to react to what they think is going to ultimately be best for the client, for the employees, not only in terms of doing the due diligence as fiduciaries on their plan, but also in terms of plan effectiveness. That's another big thing. And, you know, we think so much about the due diligence behind doing, you know, a review of a 401k plan, doing benchmarking and, you know, having fiduciary monitoring tools and all of those. Those are all very important. But the HR people in particular are going to be looking at what is the effectiveness of the plan. Are people participating in the amounts that they should? And if not, what do we want to do about it? And that's where industry benchmarking and things like that come into play. Third-party administrators are really relatively unaffected by this. I mean, they do a fee for a service that's considered administrative service anyway. They're not considered fiduciaries. Yes, sir.
I think about the number of zeros. If you talk about American funds, Franklin, you know, some of these that have in direct, smaller IRAs. I mean, what is their take on, you know, because I'm sitting wondering, what am I going to do with all my American funds IRAs? What kind of response are they having? Because they obviously can't lose all these assets.
Well, clearly, none of them want to lose any assets. That part is for sure. Again, a lot of these different firms have different modes of business today. You know, they're going to have, you know, a mutual fund company, for example, would have, you know, retail class shares. They're going to have service shares. They're going to have institutional class shares. I would suspect that, you know, they're putting, you know, their energies in terms of their legal departments and their business planning to plan accordingly that the investment advisory side of this business is going to ramp up and that the retail mutual fund share business is going to ramp down if, in fact, the rule goes the way it does. And they're going to have to adjust just like registered reps would have to adjust. Sir?
Is there any regulation of the RIAs as a result of this? Or they're like, we're free and clear? We have no.
Well, you already have plenty of regulation as an RIA. You know, again, you know, again, I think this is why I start off the way I did. It's so important to understand the premise of why the department's doing what they're doing. The thing that they are aiming for is plain and simple. They want to eradicate what they perceive, double underline, to be tainted advice. The way they look at it today, if you are an RIA or an IAR of an RIA, Act of 40, SEC, and you are stating that you're a fiduciary on an ERISA plan, which actually elevates your fiduciary standard to being exclusive benefit, not just standard of care, the Department of Labor says that's good enough for us. Because you're going to be, if something happens, then the Department of Labor gets involved, they're going to grade you from their standard. What they are not cool with is the SEC FINRA that downline of registered products because they're saying you could sell this product or that product, and because you can get paid over here instead of over here this much, you have differential income. That means you have tainted advice. We're getting rid of that. I mean, it's really that tight. Unless you have the best interest contract, but keep in mind that the best interest contract is not going to be a contract that just basically discloses away conflict. It puts you on the hook that you must do what's in their best interest, and if you do not, then you are subject to litigation up under the Attorney General of the state. So that is different than, see, we're used to a world, in the FINRA world, we're used to a world where you can disclose away conflict, and as long as it's understood by the client and it's not egregious and it still meets with the standard of suitability, then it's okay. See, that's normal way of thinking. That's not ERISA DOL Department of thinking. They come out with, here's the narrow thing, here's the exemption. If you meet that exemption, you get to do that activity. If you don't meet that exemption, you don't do that activity. There's nothing more black and white in terms of rulemaking in this world than the Department of Labor with regard to ERISA. ERISA is just, it's either yes or no. There's no, wiggle room. Yes, sir.
Can you speak to the actual physical experience? So, as I heard on the Fidelity webinar, they were alluding to the fact that before you enter into a conversation with the client
Yeah.
on any topic, because that's perceived as advice in itself, right?
Yeah, the fact that you have to present a piece of paper that a client has to sign that says, I'm going to actually get into a contract with you, but I'll tell you as soon as you sign this, that in and of itself is demonstration that the Department of Labor does not live in the real world. Having said that, I will say that that's one of the pressure points of which there is supposed to be some modicum of change. And we'll find that out, as Paul Harvey used to say when we hear the rest of the story. Yes, sir.
So mutual funds, there'll be an exemption.
The mutual fund exemption would be the best interest contract, correct?
VAs, variable annuities.
That would be best interest contract as well. If it is a securities product, I think that would be my, that's kind of your litmus test. If it would be a securities product distributed by way of commission that goes up through your FINRA supervisory line, ultimately SEC, that would all fall up under best interest contract. If in fact it's not in an an RIA driven, if you're acting as a investment advisor in an advisory account, those service class shares and those kind of things that are non-commissionable, those would continue to be there. The commissionable ones would be over here. One thing to keep in mind about fiduciary behavior in general, okay? There's two things I want to point out that are really critical. One is, as a fiduciary on account, you cannot collect both fiduciary and non-fiduciary income. So you can't have, for example, an investment advisory account where you're getting 1% as an advisory fee, and you have a account, you have your investment policy statement, you have everything that states all of that stuff, and then you turn around and sell that client a commission product. Can't do it. You can't have both fiduciary and non-fiduciary income on the same account. The second thing that is really critical to understand about acting as a fiduciary is that process trumps outcome. This is really critical to understand. There are scenarios where you could be acting as an investment advisory rep, and you give somebody something and it turns out beautiful in terms of their gains, but because you don't have an investment policy statement, because you didn't follow, exactly what, you needed to do in terms of your prudence and monitoring and so on and so forth, it could still blow up on you. By contrast, you could sell somebody an investment that turns out very badly, but because you have everything laid out exactly the way you should as a fiduciary, that demonstrates that you adhere to your fiduciary prudence standard, you're protected. So it's about process, fiduciary process, when you get over into the IA world or when you're acting as a fiduciary on an ERISA plan. As opposed to a product, it is suitability. You have a suitability review from your broker-dealer that says, yeah, this is okay, and you're not giving investment advice. It's a whole different world. I think one last one, because I think I'm running over. Yes, sir.
In my market, we've got a lot of non-registered, insurance-only licensed people selling fixed index annuities at the dinner center. How is that not tainted advice?
Yeah, I think what I heard was you have a lot of non-FINRA licensed, just insurance licensed people selling fixed index annuities.
Right.
And how is that not?
You're telling me they're gonna be exempt possibly under that old rule?
No, they won't be exempt. They would be, what they would be doing is they would be falling up. Their world's going to change too. 8424, even though it's been around for 32 years, it's changing. They're going to take mutual funds out, variable annuities out, and they're going to apply basically best interest standards. You would still be adhering to best interest standards, but you wouldn't have this extraneous contract that guides it. It would just be guided by the exemption. So they would still fall up under the exemption, and I think that this is going to be a big surprise to the IMOs that they would, one thing to keep in mind too, this is another real critical thing. If you as an individual are a fiduciary, so is your firm. That's how this goes. And I don't think the IMOs get that one yet. So their world's about to change really big too. The non-insurance license or non-FINRA licensed people. My advice to you on that, frankly, this is not investment advice, by the way. I'm not acting as a fiduciary. My advice on that one would be to say, I would get a hold of those folks and say, you know what, first thing we need to do is call up Jerry Martin and get you signed up as a registered rep at LaSalle Street Securities, because the whole world's changing and you want to change with it. And with that, I will say thank you again. Feel free to contact me individually, and we'll look forward to doing business together. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't go verbatim through the slides, I just sent it out.